the other side of toxic Christianity, I found myself faced with one question. Now what? This podcast is about that question. We have conversations with folks who are asking themselves the same things. We're picking up the pieces of a fractured and fragmented faith. We're finding treasure in what the church called trash, beauty and solidarity in people and places we were told to fear, reject, and dismiss. I'm Tammy Spencer Helms, and this is Life After Leaven. Hey everybody, welcome back to this episode of Life After Leaven. I'm your host, Tammy Spencer Helms, and I'm here with my dear friend, Karla Mendoza. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about Karla, and then we're going to jump right into the episode because I don't want to waste any time for you to get to know my friend. So Karla, not many things distract her as much as wildflowers do. She is often thinking and creating beauty to engage the good news of liberation. Karla is a storyteller, a writer, an educator with a passion for anti-racist hope and way of life. I could testify to that. She is originally from the coast of Lima, Peru, lives in Turtle Island as a Black undocumented immigrant. She spends a lot of time investigating what it means to live in the intersection of displacement, liberation, and the goodness of Creator. As a faith-based activist, she spends time advocating for migrants, refugees, and sometimes through tears, sometimes through standing in front of people who might have the power to change something. That's right. She is a firm believer in joy, so most of her days consist of deep belly laughs, being an at-home barista, reading books, and salsa dancing around the house and listening to Bad Bunny. So, Karla, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
I'm so happy to just finally get to sit with you and have people hear from you. I remember the first time I met you, I saw your smile. It was like running into the sun. The light and joy and the love that emanates from you, sis. It was so excited. And we've had a couple of guests on the show. And like I said, wanting to really introduce listeners who've read the book or haven't read it yet, but are interested to the beloved community that I find. So the book at the end talks about how God sets the lonely in family. And you are one of the people that I met after this process. So I want people to get to know you and fall in love with you like I did. So obviously, we asked everyone the same question about leaven, and leaven, as we're thinking about it, is that toxicity, that whiteness, the poison, poisonous ideologies that infiltrate our theology. So I'm interested to know about you in terms of your faith. Like, what does life after leaven look like for you? What did your faith look like beforehand, and what does it look like after?
Yeah, so my life now currently feels so much lighter and free.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that's not how the story began, right? I mean, maybe it did, right at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just turned so sour.
Mm.
My faith, I have loved Jesus my entire life.
Yeah.
I don't remember, I couldn't tell you when I met Jesus,
Yeah.
but I was just, he was it for me,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, a lot of this is has been processed through multiple therapists, multiple friendship groups, but my faith before I found Brown Jesus, was just very, I would say, solemn. It had no joy, if that makes sense.
Wow.
Because I always thought that white Jesus wanted me to suffer. Because if we were to be like Christ, well, Christ came here to suffer, right? Like that's very white evangelical theology, that Christ came here because God the Father had sent him to die.
Yes.
And so if that is the experience of Jesus, what would make me better than Jesus to not have that same experience, right? Like, I came here, I don't really know how I will die, but I really thought I was gonna die like Peter,
Yeah.
And as a kid, I had that, those thoughts, I came here to suffer and die.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I grew up in a white evangelical church.
Okay.
My parents became Protestant. They were Catholics in Peru. Everybody is Catholic
Mm-hmm.
for the
Mm-hmm.
most part.
Yeah.
And yeah, quickly they became pastors. But the church that we were a part of in Peru, now knowing what I know, is a white evangelical church.
Okay. Wow.
Because the church was open through missionaries,
Okay.
who came from the US and all that. So
Right.
yeah, so then when we moved to the States, a big part of my story is that I experienced the US as an undocumented citizen.
Mm-hmm.
And so during that time, it was learning the language and all those things that come
Mm-hmm.
with, migrating. But my parents became involved in Black and brown Spanish speaking Pentecostal church. And
Wow.
that was very different for me because I was used to white evangelicalism,
Yeah.
right? And of course, I'd always believed in the power of the Holy Spirit and, all those things. But during that time is when it kind of like exploded and it was like right in my face, because it is very Pentecostal.
Mm-hmm.
But the entire time that I was there, I kept thinking, something is wrong here. Something is wrong here. And it was because I was looking for white evangelicalism because that's what I thought church was,
Yes.
from when I was
Yes.
a kid. So of course, in my college years, that's how I ended up in very white evangelical spaces through a young adult group, of course.
Yes. Yes.
I
I'm
know,
following.
yeah,
If you know, you know.
And during that time is when I first it was kind of like I had this set of rules, and a part of me believes and have processed, that when you have a lot of uncertainty in your life, like I did because
Yes.
I was undocumented, right? Like as a teenager and as a young adult, you're looking for a set of rules that can hold you together. And white evangelicalism provides that.
Yes.
Whiteness provides that. Here is the set of rules. This is how you do things. And
Mm-hmm.
so because I needed that, to me, I was like, this is God,
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Get that.
And
I mean, I
so,
feel
but
that.
it's
I feel
not,
that. I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm just saying I feel
yeah.
that sense
No,
of
no,
like
no.
scariness about being free. Like, without rules, sometimes it feels it's like Stockholm syndrome, right? Like it's the
Yeah.
toxicity, right? So it makes it hard to leave
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
at least it's familiar, if nothing else. I hear you on that. Sorry, keep
Yeah,
going. I just
absolutely.
wanted
And
to co-sign.
no, and it's true because it's so fear-based, right?
Yes.
A lot of whiteness is fear-based. A lot of white evangelicalism is fear-based. And so it would be like, I remember, this is so funny looking back now, right? But I remember going to a conference and it was about like love and relationships. And they were like, everybody should go on a dating fast. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll go on a dating fast. But like to me, that was such a funny thing to say because I had never dated anyone.
Yes.
And I didn't really know how to date because I grew up in purity culture, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
to me, it was like, it looked like I was so holy, right? Like, oh yeah, Karla's following this dating path. And I was like, no, I'm terrified of dating. This is why, right? Like, but that's just like a very simple example, but it's kind of like what it looked like, right?
Yes.
I was so terrified of the real world of being
Yes.
present in my body that it was so easy to look so holy and
Yes.
spiritual on the
Yes.
outside,
Yes.
because of the disembodiment that was happening.
Yes.
And yeah. And so I think for me, I didn't know. I know a lot of people use the word deconstruction. I
Yeah.
didn't know what that was.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew that something was happening to me.
Okay.
And one of the first times that it happened was when I went to church
Mm-hmm.
and the pastor who was speaking said, well, us, from the stage, he's preaching and he
Mm-hmm.
says, us as middle-class Americans should do, and like listed whatever, right? And I just remember going to that sermon, and then after church being like, oh, well, I don't have to do any of the stuff you said because I'm neither of those things.
I'm not part of that us. Right.
Yeah, yeah, it was like, oh, do I get a pass from loving my neighbors? This week I get a pass because I'm not American or a middle-class person, right?
Wow.
And so that was one of the first times where I kind of had that realization of like, oh, maybe I don't belong here, but I don't know how to explain it to anybody. As the years pass, I came from a very like mixed theologies, right? Because Pentecostal, white evangelicalism, charismatic.
Yeah.
But the entire time, I will say this, I remember the day I met Holy Spirit. I was 8 years old on my mom's couch, a little girl in Lima, Peru. And I will say this, that Holy Spirit has been my friend through and through, has never left me. She has been incredible my entire life. And so because I had this trust with Holy Spirit, I asked Holy Spirit, and I don't know, maybe I was naive, or I don't know, I just was like, absolutely, I believe Holy Spirit can do this for me. But I asked Holy Spirit to delete the Bible from my brain. And
wow.
And then I said, but not from my heart, because I didn't want to sin against God, right? Like David would say.
Yes.
So and I did this prayer, right? I was a know-it-all to me. Oh my goodness, I cannot explain. I mean, I grew up, right, reading the Bible. Like, I would correct my Sunday school teachers. I would be like, that's not it, I would get into arguments with the senior pastor, be like, where is that in this book?
Maybe should have listened to you.
And so I was a know-it-all. I just everything, when it came to the Bible. And so but then I prayed this prayer, right? And I had to acknowledge, like, I was so prideful in thinking I knew everything, right? So it was very humbling for me to say that prayer and then to believe that it had happened. And at the time I was doing youth ministry, and kids have a lot of questions all the time. And I just remember being like, can I get back to you on that? But like a year before that, if they would have been like, what does the Bible say about sex before marriage? I would be like, this is what it says on this verse and this verse and this verse,
Right. Yes, right.
Yeah, and now I had no answers. And it was very humbling, to have those moments, but I had prayed for that. And there were like, it was very like, it was like a progression of events, right? Like, I remember Tamir Rice was murdered in Cleveland, Ohio, and I live about a couple hours from there. And I just remember having this moment of like, I don't think anybody in my community understands what just happened to a 12-year-old Black kid, right? And when I first moved to the States, we lived in what people call the hood, right? And so all I could think about was like even some of my classmates and me being a 12, like I came to the States when I was 11 years old. Wow. And a lot of the people that I first met was when I was 12, and so thinking about them, and it just like, it didn't make me spiral, but I remember clearly, I don't think I've ever had a panic attack before that, but I remember clearly having a panic attack and thinking, I don't belong here. Again, like, it was like that theme, like, I don't belong here because people can't understand what I'm seeing and can't understand my experience. And so I think a lot of moments like that. And then I was very, very white evangelical. I don't think I'll ever be able to I don't think I'll ever be able to explain
Mm-hmm.
how deep it was in my bones.
Mm-hmm.
I went to do an internship at a ministry in Missouri. Um, as someone mentions in their book. And
Wow.
it's so I was telling someone, I said, if you spend time there, you don't ever have to read the actual name. You don't have to read the names of the people. You just know.
You just know.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And during that time, I was there when the Supreme Court was making a decision on gay marriage.
Yep.
And it was rough
Mm-hmm.
because I still was in the spaces where, I mean, just there itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
But even like people back home,
Mm-hmm.
I was in spaces that believed
Mm-hmm.
that gay marriage wasn't, right, all those things, right?
Yep.
um anyway, and I just remember being so conflicted and being like, I don't think this is it. I think something is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And also because there was so much focus on that when it was happening, especially like during the week of,
Mm-hmm.
um and I remember thinking, like, how come no one is praying for undocumented immigrants? Because at the same time, there was a court case happening that would affect the lives of
Yes.
undocumented immigrants, you know?
Yes.
And I remember thinking, like, something is wrong because nobody seems to care about that. Everybody's praying horribly against Justice Sotomayor, and she was the first
Yes.
Latina judge to
Mm.
ever be in the Supreme Court, right? And so I remember being like, they just paint her in this like terrible, I'm like, and I'm not one to like defend any party. Like, I'm like,
Yes.
all of
Right.
y'all, this is not liberation. None of this is
Exactly.
liberation.
Facts. Right. Exactly.
It's like, yeah, so but I just remember being like, something is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Um and then after that, I remember I was just talking to a friend who also had spent time there. And I saw her like the day after I got back from doing that internship.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, Karla, how was your time there? And I was a little nervous to say it, but then I looked at her and I said, it was okay, but I think it was a cult, so I think I need to take a break. And then I just like, that's all I said.
Wow. Where do you think that came from? Like the wherewithal to know that like this is, I mean, that's incredible because it took me a really long time to even come to a conclusion like that, right? Like what was the thing inside you that kind of knew to identify it as that at that point in time?
Yeah, so what happened was, this is like 2015. At the beginning of 2015, I felt like Holy Spirit was saying to me, I need you to read the book of Revelation. And I was like, but why?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had just learned that people had different views about the book of Revelation.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know that before. Like, I grew up with like very end-timey theology, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but I kept feeling this push of like Holy Spirit being like, you need to read it and you need to ask why you think these things,
Mm-hmm.
And I get to this ministry in Missouri, and I was so naive. I can't explain how naive I was.
Mm-hmm.
I went there because I wanted to pray. This is actually why. I did no research on their beliefs or
Mm-hmm.
anything. Like, I was just like, I just want to spend time with Jesus, right? Like, this
Yes,
is what I'm thinking.
exactly.
And when I get there, it's so end timey, so incredibly end timey. And at this, because I had been thinking about this before that, without knowing that this is what was going to be happening at this
Yes.
ministry. I was already reading different people, and even at the time, like I remember I was reading the sermons from church in Minneapolis, that
Yeah.
is like, it tends to be more progressive.
Mm-hmm.
And the pastor was talking about the different views of Revelation.
Yes.
And he tended to be more on the open theism side of
Yes. Uh-huh.
things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, this is so interesting to me. But it was enough that I didn't trust
Mm-hmm.
what was being said to me. Um,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow, Karla. And so I'm trying to like stay in that professional vibe right now because I'm like, we were in the same place. So to me, it's kind of like, wait a minute, what? Like you were already prepared for that. That is so kind of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Like
Mm-hmm.
that's really, it's
Yeah.
touching me.
Yeah.
The Holy Spirit would say, "Hey, sis, let me prep you before you go out here." Like, what I love about that, Karla, is like I think people often wonder because that place was a very there was some good fruit that showed up in my life, like my love for the
Mm-hmm.
word, and like you're saying, like I've hidden your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. Like I sang the Bible, read the Bible, studied the
Mm-hmm.
Bible, prayed the Bible. So it was like it was very in that way, it really did take root. But what I think is so interesting is that people, when they come out of places like that, because that's not the only space like that, um,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't know what about all those encounters? Like, what about all those dreams I had with God or things I felt like God spoke to me that were so clear? And then they come out of these places and they don't know what to do with that stuff. And what's beautiful to me about your story is like the Holy Spirit prepares you to go into this space on the front end so that you are already equipped to know, like, I'm here to get what I need and I'm here with Jesus. But Jesus meeting me here is not an endorsement of all this other stuff that's going on
Yeah.
here. Um, and I remember coming to that conclusion after Trayvon, like because it was so freeing that I could
Mm-hmm.
keep that stuff, right? Like we can keep the beautiful things about our encounters with Joshua the Nazarene, right? And his
Mm-hmm.
spirit. And I think about that. So I really appreciate you telling me. I would love to hear more about kind of, you're in this place, the Holy Spirit prepares you, you leave, you're like, I think it was a cult. So thinking about like how we tie this into the belonging in the body, like these places that exist really do come with sort of a culture, a sense of
Mm-hmm.
how would you say, they have a community around an ideology, right? And so as long as you don't
Mm-hmm.
default on the ideology, you belong, right? And when you
Mm-hmm.
start to change your mind about that, your belonging becomes a question, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm wondering about this for you in terms of thinking about belonging with your experiences of being undocumented, right? Experiencing being in this
Mm-hmm.
country. Talk to me a little bit about belonging in terms of whiteness and white Jesus and how you've experienced that in your ethnic identity.
Yeah. Yeah. So I I mean, even in Peru, like Afro-Peruvians, I think are maybe like 4% of the population of
Mm-hmm.
Peru.
Mm-hmm.
So I never really grew up in Black spaces, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
there was never a place where I could just go and be Black.
Right, right.
And then I from early on, I experienced a lot of anti-Blackness, fat phobia, all those things. But then when I moved to the States, it's a whole different story.
Mm-hmm.
It's so connected, yes, but I was suddenly in very Black spaces,
Mm-hmm.
but then also not really knowing the language, so not really having a way to communicate
Mm. Wow. Okay.
with the people around me, right? And so I ended up in Latinx spaces,
Mm-hmm.
and I quickly within like a couple of years, I found out that anti-Blackness didn't, you know,
Mm-hmm.
didn't
Equal opportunity
just stay
employer.
somewhere else, right? Like, yeah, exactly.
Even Black
So
people can be anti-Black.
yeah, it's true. And so it was really hard because I was a teenager, right? Like a teenager moving countries,
Yes.
realizing like I can't go back home. What, you know, and it's so funny, like the question that every like third culture or, you know, migrant to this country, it has this question, right? What is home? And there's even like TikToks joking about it, right? Because it is this like sense of like, what is home? What is belonging? And so I remember, you know, when I experienced something really terrible when I was 15. And so that made me kind of realize like I have to survive, right? And the anti-blackness, it was related to anti-blackness. So and like very patriarchal and all that. So it made me realize I had to survive. And to survive, I had to assimilate. And so because at that point I was in a different, like my high school was a combination of a lot of people, because they only accepted like 100 kids, you know, it was like a very like special program kind of thing. And at that point, like I was mostly with white people, and so I started assimilating to whiteness. I mean, like I can even like pinpoint almost when it happened, right? And yeah, I remember like one of the examples I give is like I actually really do enjoy heavy metal. But most people would never think that, especially now when they look at me, they're like, there's no way, you know? But but in high school, all of my friends at the time would listen to like heavy metal and rock and all that, you know, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I started wearing like all black, Metallica t-shirt, like, you know, and it was this sense of like, this is how I belong with my peers. And then at the same time, I remember like being in the, you know, and because my high school was in a college campus. So being on the college campus, walking around, listening to afro-peruvian music, right? And on my t-shirt, it says Metallica, you know? And yeah. And so I think there was always that sense of like, I have to hide who I am if I'm going to belong. And that transferred over to the church, through any job I had, you know, anything, like there was always this sense of hiding. And it was safe there, right? Because I wasn't documented. I am still, right? But yeah, and so it was like I can only let people in up to this point, because if they get past even like 1 foot over, then I have to tell the truth. And the truth is scary, right? Like the truth is that I don't belong here. The truth is that this government doesn't want me here. You know, all those things. And then getting to the white church, it was like, oh, we love everybody and you belong, right? But it was like, no, you belong if you fit this set of rules.
Exactly.
You know, and I already been doing that since I moved to this country. So it was kind of like, you know, I can do that. I can present to you charismatic, extroverted, leadership material Karla, you know.
Come on, Karla. You telling the truth right now, sis.
Yeah. You know, I can present that to you because I know what it's like to assimilate. But I think the problem was that once they assimilated, then it was just easy. You know, I didn't have to work for it. I didn't have to do anything anymore. It was easy to avoid the conversations on politics, even though like everybody in my house was so happy President Obama had won, right?
Me too, sis. Oh my God.
Yeah, right. Like it was so easy to just avoid those conversations. It was easy to you know, when anything related to immigration would come up, I would just be like, well, and then just kind of change the topic, right?
Of
and
course, yes.
Never have to tell anyone anything. Until of course the day came. So in 2016, my life, so when I went to this ministry, it was in 2015. 2016, I was already like, something is terribly wrong with everyone here. I don't know what, right? And the church that I was going to at the time was very connected to this ministry and to the one in Redding, California. So so I was like, no, something is really wrong. But then 2016 came, right? And for a lot of people, the election was what triggered the exit. But for me, what triggered the exit was my mom was moving countries. My mom also lived in the US as an undocumented citizen. And so in 2016, she had to move back to Peru to take care of my grandma because there was no one else who could take care of my grandma. But because of her immigration status, that meant that she couldn't come back here, you know? And because of my family's immigration status, we couldn't go back and forth to see her. And every lawyer ever, at this point, I have this back in 2012, President Obama gave an executive order with a program called DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. So if you came here before, I think, the age of 16, you were able to apply for this permit, and, you know, it let you like work, get a license, have a social security number, you know, stuff like that. But at this point, everybody, and you can apply to leave the country with this permit. But because of the elections coming up, everybody was like, do not apply to leave this country, because if the 45th president, who, you know, of the United States becomes president, then we don't even know you'll be able to come back. And so now I'm sitting here, my mom is leaving, and no one knows what that means. I had maybe like 3 or 4 friends who sat with me and were like, we're willing to sit with you and understand, you know? And they tried their best, and I'm so thankful for them a lot. Like, they're all in my life still, because they were willing to, right? Like, to take that risk with me. But that's when I realized that, one, I was like, I think I was like one of 3 people who were Black people in this church. And I was the only one, and I would make my dad go with me. So really, you know, like I was the only one who was going there Sunday after Sunday, doing youth ministry, all those things. And then I realized, like, I think I'm the only undocumented person in this church, right? And I'm like the only young adult Black woman, you know, all these things, right? Like, I started like thinking of all the things that it's just me. And then I thought, this is so strange, because I keep thinking of that verse where it talks about how Jesus is our high priest, our high priest, right? And he like relates to us and all that. And I was like, it's kind of interesting, because I think at this point, only if I believe this verse, then only Jesus can relate to me and nobody else in this room. Come on, somebody. You know? And so, and it was like this kind of like, okay, I have Jesus, and also I have nobody else. Like, nobody embodied right next to me, right? Who can understand what I'm going through. Right. And like, I clearly remember one time, my dad was a pastor for a long time, right? And so my dad is so kind, and they asked him to record a CD of like Spanish music. And so they're like recording, I go to this thing with him, and I remember one of the women there is like dancing around as my dad is, because, you know, they believe in like the flags and all that. And so she's like dancing around, and she said, how's your week going? And I said, oh, well, and I think it was like maybe a couple weeks before my mom was leaving. I said, well, my mom is moving, so it's like really stressful, you know? And she said, oh, where's she going? I said, well, she's going back to Peru. And she said, well, that's wonderful. And I was like, okay, I'm not having this conversation, right? Like, I just had this sense of like, am I like a ghost? Like, what's going on, right? Like, I just felt so unseen, so unheard, so unknown. Yeah, and then of course, like the 2016 election happened, and then it was like, no, these people definitely do not see me, because I remember going to church the Sunday after the election results, and people were just laughing, and the music that was sang was very like victorious music, and I'm sitting there like, there is lament in my heart. There is fear, like very real fear, not like,
of course.
and you know, and I remember like people being like, you don't have to be afraid, and I was like, but you don't have to
Be
think
me.
about ICE. Yeah, you know, you don't have to
Right.
think about ICE, you don't have to think about the police, you don't have to think about, you know, your job, your all those things, right? Yeah, and so and that's kind of like when I left, where I said, I don't think I could do this, you know. It was, I to this day I could say it was one of the hardest things I had to do, not necessarily because of the entire church, but because I was doing youth ministry, and to leave those kids.
Yes, I feel you, sis. Yes, I feel you. Yeah.
That is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do as an adult.
And you carry them. I mean, I know, like I still got names, faces, smiles, laughs in my head. You know, it's hard to, I hear you on that. And that's funny that you left. I was gone. I left in 2012. So it's so interesting to hear what was going on even after I left. Child, I don't know what I would have done if I had stayed. Oh my gosh, knowing that.
Yeah. Well, and so here's the thing. I was telling yesterday, I was with one of my friends who is kind of like a mom and a mentor to me. And I said, I've been reading my friend Tamisa's book, and you know, a part of me wishes like, I wish I would have known her like 10 years ago. I would have saved myself a lot of trouble.
Girl. I mean, and that's my hope. Like as we start to like go towards the end, because I mean, I'm gonna have you back on because you are a wealth. And the thing is that the Holy Spirit, like I said, she emanates, and the way that you speak and the way you articulate is such a gift to us. And I think the other thing, Karla, is that you bring a perspective that I'm sure that people that are taking the step out of the toxic Christianity have not even embraced or been told they were allowed to embrace. And I want them to be able to sit at your feet and learn from you. So I'm just so thankful that you did this, that you're on the show this season. And yeah, we're definitely gonna have you back. But I have I have those final questions for you, that I ask every guest. I'm like, oh, girl, let's hit like stop so we can keep talking. But we're gonna do the show. Okay, so the first question is kind of like, what are you bringing with you? So you have this beautiful story of knowing Holy Spirit at a young age, and then being introduced to white Jesus and all of these things. And so, you know, you talked about that passage of David, like hide the word in my heart, but take it out my head, right? So like, what are you, in addition to that, like, are there things that you're bringing with you from the rubble of kind of a toxic faith foundation?
Yeah, I think one of the things is when I left, I read a book, and there were two lines on there that it kind of gave this idea of like leaving all of this is like a shipwreck, you know. So now what are you gonna save? Like, what is the one piece of wood that it's gonna get you to shore?
Yes, exactly.
And there were and there were two things that stuck with me. One was that spirit is in the wind, and so whenever I would see like the grass move, I'd start weeping because I would just be like, Holy Spirit is here.
Oh my gosh,
and, you know, it would just be so constant, you know, like I could be on the way to like whatever, to the store, and I'd be like, the flowers are moving, and I just be like,
Yes.
oh God,
You take it like personal, like, oh, the wind is blowing and the Holy Spirit is wind. That means you see me. Oh, snap. I used to do the same thing, especially with wind. Yes.
Yep.
Come on, sis, talk to us.
And then the other thing was, if I know nothing, if I know nothing, even if I don't even understand or believe what I've been taught about the cross, right? Like now my beliefs on the cross are so different. But I remember thinking, if I know nothing, I know Jesus Christ crucified. And that's what got me through. That is, I was like, I know I have been lied to. I know and I had to admit that, like, and I think in so many ways I still grieve that I was lied to for so long.
Yes.
And but I was like, I know the men who went to that cross. Why did he get there? I think I was lied to about why he got there. Exactly. How did he get there? I think I was lied to about that. A lot of those things. Even like as I say it, right? Like I feel a little weepy. Like I didn't know anything else, but I knew a faithful friend.
Yes, that's absolutely right, sis. Come on.
And he'd always been so kind. He'd always showed up. Not once let me down. Not once didn't provide for me. And I see that, and I don't mean like provision, like just like material things. Actually, that's like the least of my worries, right? Like, it was the provision, like in friends, in people. Like I remember when I left the church that there's so many folks from the LGBTQ community who took me in and just like wrapped me in love and in their arms, and it was like the sweetest, right? And I remember thinking like, oh my God, I think my the theology that I still kind of carry, right, because I just left, says that I shouldn't even be here. And you all should hate me because I for so long believed something that would cause you harm. And they took me in, and so I think about like the provision of God, to love me through the queer community, and I didn't deserve that, like it was like, to me it was like, I don't deserve your grace. Yeah, so I think of those moments, right? Like I think of the provision of I remember one day I was so sad about leaving church, and I lived like 45 minutes from that church at the time. And so it was hard for me to see anybody really after I left, because I'm in a different city. And randomly one of my youth kids shows up to this coffee shop where I'm working, right? Like and I was just like, how can I not believe in a God who loves me, in a God who loves people? But now I think just and I think that also, right, the provision and the expansion of what love means. I think for so long it was very like, I can only love people in this way, and they have to fall into these rules. And now it's like, no, I think love is a one-on-one thing, yes, and it is also very communal, but because it is communal, then it has to also be systematically. And I didn't know that before, right? Like at first I thought it was like, if people's hearts change, then it was like, no, actually, at this point I'm like, just change the law, and then like they will get like but anyway, so yeah, I think for me is definitely like, I found, I think it's easy to push aside the idea of Jesus, because for so long it was the light of white Jesus. But the thing is, like, because white Jesus is an idol, then it means that like the real Jesus has like, he's like, white Jesus is like nothing to me, right? Like
Exactly.
so then the real Jesus, brown Palestinian Jesus, can break through white Jesus, because and whatever, like, of course, like we all get there's not one person who has everything right, like, so it's like did I learn that Jesus was good? Yes. And that is the true, that is the real Jesus. So I feel it was like a mixture of like,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
Yeah. So
yeah. Oh my gosh. It speaks to the eagerness of God to be known and to make themselves clear.
mm-hmm.
You're right. Like I'm with you on all of that. Jesus for life. Okay. What are you binging?
Ooh, okay. I have been on a Robert Glasper kick. I got to see
Okay.
him last week live for the first time, so I'm so excited.
Wow.
But I love him. I've also, well, I always listen to Bad Bunny a lot, so it's just like what it is. I don't know
Yes.
how I got here.
I know that's
I think it's
right.
because for so long I wasn't really into reggaeton because it's like
Yeah.
reggaeton is like trap, right? So
Mhm.
it was like don't listen to that stuff. And now I'm like, is the only thing I
It
listen to.
is
I'm
the
sorry.
child. I hear you. I hear you. All right, all right. I hear you. All
Yeah.
right.
And of course, I haven't binged it yet because it just came out, but I am so excited for Ted
Ted
Lasso.
Lasso. It's Ted Lasso day on your birthday yesterday. I knew you was gonna say that. That show is adorable. I love it. Awesome. Awesome. Sis, I am so, so, so happy. I want you to think real hard about some words to live by because we're going to end the episode on that. So hopefully the people listening to this podcast are folks who are like, oh, I didn't realize I wasn't alone. I didn't realize you could have joy in life and Jesus on the other side of whiteness, right? So that being said, what would you say? What is some words to live by that you would say to that person?
Yeah, so I would say one of the words that really struck me was there is an author, her name was Rachel Held Evans.
Yes.
And
Ooh, we miss her.
I'm so thankful for her life. And yes, we do. And she used to have a sticky note, I believe, in either her planner or her writing space, that had the words "tell the truth." And when I heard that, it was like it was implanted in my being. Tell the truth. And what I mean when, and I'm sure it meant something to her, but to me, it means tell the truth of who you are, tell the truth of what you like, what you don't like, what your needs are, because I think so much of whiteness steals from our embodiment. And so because of that, there's this separation between, it's like very spiritual, very up in the clouds. And it's just like, what if you like come down to earth and like touch the ground, right? And tell the truth about what that feels like. I'll be honest, I'm terrible with plants, right? So I'm like, I'll touch the dirt, but I don't think I can grow anything. I think it'll be a miracle if it grows. It's just stuff like that, right? Like I think, and also like feel free to laugh and to like jump into the silliness of life, to think about like one of my practices is like I watch cartoons all the time because I need imagination. Right. And so I'm like, jump into imagination, just daydream, right? I think a lot of times it's like you don't have time to daydream, you have to save the souls of other people, right? No, you can daydream. Yeah, I think if any, and also like I'm not going to say it's easy. It's not, it's costly. But there are so many people, not even just in the US, but around the world who are having these questions, who are coming together. Yeah. And even if when we don't see them like face to face, they're there. And I think that energy is real and active, right? So I think there is so much hope here. And you don't have to let go of everything, right? Like there are parts that are good. So yeah, I would just say tell the truth about who you are, and start believing in imagination and daydreams and all of that again.
You are such a beautiful person. I fell for you as soon as I saw you, and I know that this ending that people are feeling it, and I can actually feel it. So I want you all to really take that in, that it is, feel free to laugh, tell the truth, enter into your imagination. Those are things that I feel like we really need right now. So I thank you for that. I thank you for being on the show. Thank you for who you are,
friend.
and speaking and telling us the truth and teaching us. I appreciate you and love you deeply. And let us know where we can find you. Where can they find you? And what's the name of your book?
I don't know if that's coming yet, but okay. I usually write, I'm definitely more active on Instagram, so at Dear Karla, that's my handle. And then I have a newsletter, which the link is also on my Instagram, but I have a newsletter and it's also Dear Karla at substack.com, but that's where I write most of the time. I don't know when a book will be coming.
We're going to try to make it happen, Captain. Holy Spirit, that's your friend. Holy Spirit, that's your friend. Tell your friend to write a book. Thank you so much, friend.
Thank you so much for having me.